Hi, everybody. Welcome. So today we're going to talk about giving and receiving. So letting people have the gift of giving to you being important. So sometimes, if you've experienced just like giving something to someone, even on a birthday, and seeing the expression on their face, and especially when you know it's like genuine and they're just like, just so happy that you got them something, or they're happy that you knew the right thing. But sometimes it's just a simple act of just like, wow, you thought of something to give to them, and it feels really good. And so, this idea is that sometimes someone wants to give to you. So sometimes maybe they want to like bring something to a party, and you didn't ask them to bring it, but it's like it was kind of them to do it. It wasn't like a situation where you're just like, they knew they shouldn't have or something, and it becomes a whole drama thing. But it's like it's this just the idea that like it's a really nice gesture when someone does it, and then accepting it, or someone decides to like get you a book that they know that you might like, that's like a really good uplifting book, and it's like a good novel or something. And just something that someone decides to do. Or maybe it's just like walking someone across the street because they know they need help. um, and it's safe to do so because both parties accepted that, oh yes, I do need the help, and I would be willing to offer the help. Just like little simple acts. It doesn't have to be like um, related to buying something. Oftentimes it's just like it's a simple thing. When you give a gift, right? It's giving a gift of something that someone could receive. And so, why am I talking about it today? Because sometimes I feel like we could get in the flow of giving, um, or in the flow of receiving, or in the flow of like not accepting because perhaps we think we're not able to give back, or we have to give back, or something along those lines. And so we kind of are off putting that, like that balance of giving and receiving. And it doesn't have to be like, oh, they gave, now I give. It's giving without the idea that you need to get something in return, because that's truly giving. Just like the example of like walking someone across the street. You don't expect someone to do that for you, but it's nice to know that like it could have had a ripple effect, or even if you've seen it have a ripple effect. If you've seen someone else do that for someone else, walk someone across the street, and you're just like, wow, that's really nice. And just seeing how that interaction went. Like, they asked the person in a certain way, the person said yes, or even said no kindly, but appreciated it so much, or something along those lines. Doesn't mean that's how it's always going to happen, but that might have created a ripple effect. And so, someone just watching you do it could have that same effect as well. And I've talked about this before. And it's just like holding the door open for someone. It feels good, to be able to do something so simple, and it creates a ripple effect, for others to want to do it as well. And so yeah, so these little acts of like giving and receiving, and creating that feeling of like goodness and kindness in your community or wherever you go. And of course, always be mindful, like where you're doing this. Perhaps you're traveling in certain countries or certain areas that you're not sure about the culture, and it might be um, seen in a different way. It doesn't mean that like, oh, you stop being yourself, or you're stopping that flow. It's just being mindful that like we need to do things in a space that's also safe. You're not doing that in like a dark back like alleyway type of situation. So being mindful of like, the context of where you're doing this, but still being true to you, so that it's not, because in some societies they might actually just need it. So it's not about just following a society's rules and stuff, but just doing it because it's like, oh, it's nice to do it as well. So just being mindful of those situations, and when to do it and when to not. And and yeah. And so so yeah, so it so when you're like giving, let's say, so it doesn't mean that the other person will feel a certain way. And that's not your intention. You know that it's like the right thing to do, or it's something that you want to do, and it's something that you perhaps even feel called that you should do. Let's say like perhaps like give someone this book or give them some change or whatever it is. It doesn't mean they might feel joyful right away. Maybe they're in a certain space in their head, or they're going through something at that moment, or whatever it is. Um, but um, but perhaps like afterwards they think about it and they're just like, wow, that was really nice. Maybe it takes a few years and they think about it when they're in a better place and they're just like, wow, what that person did for me, it didn't leave my mind, and that was really kind and nice. And again, it's not your place to want to control that. It's just about like, you know, it's the right thing, you feel like you should, and it feels good when you do it. So so why not follow that, that feeling, that call, and understanding when it is a feeling to do it, and or when it's, are you confusing the feeling of like, oh, feeling called to do it, and confusing it with like not doing it. You know, sometimes people mix that up as well. But oftentimes, like the simple things like the holding the door, walking someone across the street if it's safe, or, you know, just those little simple acts of giving. Um, and allow someone to perhaps do that for you as well, right? Like opening the door, um, you know, helping you with your bags if it's safe to do so, and you think, you know, it's, you feel comfortable with them doing that. And yeah, like little stuff like that. And so um so yeah, and then so not expecting, the next thing is like not expecting them to have this facial expression or a certain way that you've scripted in your head of how it's going to go and feel good. Just knowing that you did the right thing, or you did something that you know, is good, is enough. So even if like, you know, they just say like a simple thank you, and it's like not as like expressive as you wanted or whatever, you still need to realize that like, wow, they might be really in their head or going through something or whatever the case is, but you know, did the right thing, and they'll probably think about it later and feel good. And again, it is like, of course you are for a little bit thinking that like, oh, they'll feel good about it later, but it's this idea, it's because you know that like doing the right thing will, they, it's a good gesture, and someone that's not receiving it in that way is not in a place to receive it mentally and emotionally in that way at that time. But you know that that's the good that you're rippling out into the world, that perhaps they will see the good, and that it will ripple out into other people seeing it, or them doing it for other people, kind of like that paying it forward idea. And so and yeah, and then also like being mindful of like doing this with good intentions. So if you're trying to do something in order to receive something back, it doesn't mean that it's bad, or if that thought could sometimes even come up even though you have good intentions. But that other thought of like, oh, I'm doing it also because I want this, this, and this, might try to override your good intentions. So trying to remind yourself again that, no, I'm actually doing this like intentionally to, you know, to like to help this person, and that's what I want. And if it leads to this, this, or this, that's fine. But you know what? It's the right thing to do, because that's when you'll feel really, truly good. Like it's a different type of feeling. And then those thoughts and stuff might try to come override and take away that feeling of good, that like, oh, made like, you know, now I deserve this, this, and this. And it's just like, bring yourself back to reminding yourself that like, no, I did this with good intentions. Those are just thoughts that are just passing by, that I don't need to hold on to, you know. And so and doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you if those thoughts come up. Those are thoughts that come up, because maybe that's how one was trained, or certain societies that's normal to like have that transactional give and take. And yeah, and just thoughts can come up. We could have picked him up from TVs, shows, family members, society, a lot of places. Or just seeing the interactions and thinking that's just how it's supposed to be. But just reminding yourself, like, no, I did this because I truly did want them to have, like, like get to the other side of the street. Um, and it had nothing to do with the fact that they're a CEO of this company or something. But and I'm glad I was able to do that, and just keep bringing yourself back to that, so that it's coming from like a genuine, intentional place. And also reminding yourself that sometimes it can be a season of giving. Sometimes, like, you could be in a position, mentally and emotionally, but also financially, to be able to give to someone. And that's also a very spiritual act as well, to give that flow of abundance that they talk about. And so, in one way, it's financial, right? The flow of abundance is in many different types of resources and ways. And so, so knowing that, like, maybe you're in a place of giving and you want to give more than you usually do because you are able to, and knowing that it's okay, but knowing that, like, just because you have all this, that people might want to give to you in different ways, and it might not seem like the same equivalent, but allowing them to, because maybe they can't meet you at that financial level, so it's like, oh, it's okay that, like, they're meeting you at wherever they can. And so to be grateful for the times where people are giving to you, be like, wow, that person, that was so kind, they opened up the door for me. Oh, that was so kind that they offered to hold this for me. Or, oh, that was so kind that, you know A, B, and C, whatever you want to say it is. But the idea is that, like, understanding that, like, you might be there in a financial way, they're giving in another way. They're giving with their time, they're giving with their small, like, with a small gesture or a big gesture. So yeah, and then, but knowing that, like, yeah, you are receiving, to know that there is a balance and a flow. That's like, oh, I've reached this place and now I'm just giving, giving, giving. No, we want to be able to allow to receive, to create a nice balance, so that we don't become, because sometimes some people could be in a place of constantly giving financially, that they become blinded by this, oh, I could just fix this with money situation, or throwing money at a situation, and so, or to people, and not appreciating the people for, how they're able to give and how they're giving, whether it's like free time or whatnot. So even like the simple act of, like, okay, well, you've been giving to them by, giving money or this, but maybe they're like wanting to, but they also like give their free time by, babysitting your kids or whatnot, not as like a exchange, but that's just like what they want to do, and that's what they're able to do, as like a, let's say, a family member or whatnot. So simple things like that are really important to identify, so that that, like, wow, um, I'm so grateful and appreciative that, that I'm able to see these acts of giving to people, of receiving these gifts from people, and the acts that I give, but I also am able to receive. So you don't want to be blinded by just like, oh, I'm just giving all the time. I'm the one who's fixing or doing things, because that's not the only resource in the world, of abundance. And so yeah, so yeah, understanding the seasons sometimes, but knowing the balance of that as well. And of course, some cultures have something where it might be considered rude um, to when you give something, um, or when you offer something, that someone accepts it right away. So being mindful that, like, there are cultural norms as well. And so sometimes you have to offer a few times, but also knowing that, like, if it's being too pushy or whatnot, because there's also that balance as well. But yeah, so there's cultural context in all of this as well. But yeah, so I wanted to talk about this idea of giving and receiving and understanding the balance of it, because sometimes some people could be blocking that receiving. I feel like that Joey's episode where he talks about giving and receiving a lot. So, because I'm saying it so many times. If you haven't watched that episode, and you do after this, you will understand. But um, it's this idea of giving and receiving. That's all that keeps playing in my head. But seriously, like it is this idea of like giving and receiving and knowing that like, sometimes we might be blocking it. So for instance, like you might be bringing something to a group of friends and they made it like adamantly known that, hey, I don't bring anything because no one else is bringing anything and whatnot. And sometimes it's some people might not feel secure enough to receive because they feel like, oh, someone's just always overpowering the situation because they're able to. But if it's coming from like a well-intentioned place, seeing the good in what the person is doing, they just want to offer something that they have to share with the group. Sometimes like that might be their love language as well. So to be able to share or to give gifts in that way. And so not blocking it and being like, oh, if you want to bring that, like, sure, that would be great. And not making it like, oh, well, we can't bring it, so you shouldn't bring it. So there's no transaction type of situation. And maybe some people feel secure in that way. It's just like, oh, I always feel bad because that person's bringing. But knowing that, like, well, if they're bringing, and it's from a good intention place, then they shouldn't expect someone to give back like equally or whatnot, right? You give without thinking about it. And my grandfather, who is like very, very well off and has been like, was very high up in his field of work, I asked him like about money in abundance, but in Farsi, so the words are very different. But and he has very strict rules, and they're not strict as like a tight hold, but it's just like rules of life that he's seen and how he handles money, and that was echoed by a family member who has said in a different story after my grandfather has said that, and in the past, before my grandfather told me this story, that when you give something, you do not expect, like, you give it. You don't bring it up. You don't expect someone to give it back to you. You don't, like, you give it to give. You don't bring it up in front of others. You don't bring it up to them. Like, of course, I'm not talking about situations where like someone owes you money, but like when you're giving something and you're always just like, oh, remember I did this, oh, remember I did that, like, type of thing. There's a certain word for it in the language I speak, but I can't think of the word in English. But so it's just this idea of like, constantly bringing it up to someone, and doesn't make someone feel good. Perhaps maybe that person, maybe it does the first time or second time, they're just like, oh my god, yes, thank you so much. But after a few times, it's like, okay, you're going to make them feel a certain way just so you could feel good that you gave. Then the intentions might not be in the best place possible. So it's not talking about when someone owes you money or stuff like that, but knowing that he was like, I took a long video of him describing what he meant, and it was crazy because like I'd watched so many videos of people talking about law of abundance and and how to like deal with money and stuff like that, and he was saying such similar things, and he's been doing that since he was very, very young, because he was like in a high up position at a very young age. And so I don't know if he was thinking that when he was like under 20-ish, like, or under mid 20s, but for sure, like, in his 20s or on, he was living that way, and he saw that the world worked that way, and he saw that like that's how you are able to handle money as well, like, or to attract more money in your life. And so, which is pretty cool, like he had certain types of rules because he saw that that's how the world worked. And then he also like made sure that like he doesn't like even to this day, he doesn't like if someone's like gossiping, someone is talking bad about someone, or repeating old stories that are not positive and stuff, like certain things. Like he's seen how the world works in certain ways, and he's very sure that that's how it works. And so like now we're hearing it from like, well, me from him and other mentors and other family members, that like, yeah, that's how like they know the world works. You know, maybe they know how it works in certain areas of life and not all areas, but we could always learn from them, even if it's what not to do as well sometimes. But yeah, so I thought that was helpful to share, that that giving and receiving could be really important, and to see where you could give, where you could receive, where have you been stopping yourself from receiving and accepting, or where have you been stopping yourself from giving, because it doesn't mean you have to give like something financial, right? Like back then, the resources to exchange was salt. Salt was like a huge, like it was considered like gold back then, right? Like the resources, and you know, even way back then, perhaps other things. And so, and I know other things, but I'm just bringing up that particular scenario of salt and, you know, other exchanges of items, of goods. So, um, so yeah, so just know that like it doesn't have to be. It's just about keeping that flow, and not resisting it and not stopping it, because of like, you know, of a personal insecurity perhaps, or you know, reason that you might come up, that you might create in your head. um, and so just doing it from a good, well-intentioned place is going to be key as well. And then if other thoughts come up, reminding yourself that you are doing it from a good, well-intentioned place, unless the thoughts are coming up and you think that it might not be. So you might have to do some work on that. But yeah, so hope this helps, and have a wonderful, wonderful, magical day. Bye.